that that story of Kargil war still has many lessons for our country and our citizens. And I'll be talking about some of those lessons. The war was not won by me, but the war was won by the soldiers of the Indian Army who worked with me at that time. I just happened to be in the position of chief of the army staff. Toward the end of the war, I'll be talking about some of those heroes of ours who have or who should be icons for many of the youngsters who are sitting here. We all remember our sportsmen, our actors and all these things, but many of us forget our soldiers who gave their life for our tomorrow, for our nation's tomorrow. So I'll be talking about some of them as to what they were thinking during the war. I think the first lesson we have to remember is that national security should never be taken for granted. In fact, currently I would say, we are living in an uncertain situation. Nobody knew, even I didn't know, that situation in Kashmir will become so bad as you will see it today. Just a few years ago, we thought that everything is working very well. And similarly, our relations with Pakistan, or China, or anywhere in the world, if you look at it. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and therefore it is absolutely important for our country to remember that national security should never be taken for granted. Now, the example of Kargil war, in February 1999, our Prime Minister went all the way to Lahore. He hugged the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who is also the Prime Minister today. And they signed an agreement which is very famously known as Lahore Agreement. And within less than 4 months, you saw we had the fight. We fought with them at Kargil. Now, the preparation for Kargil war, I can now say, that was started by Pakistan sometimes a week or 10 days after Pervez Musharraf took over. Even his own Prime Minister did not know. And people started entering into our land sometimes in the month of, I think, March, when there was very heavy snow. And generally you didn't expect that kind of activity along that border, for which they suffered, of course, later on. So this is the kind of uncertain world that we are living in today. Let me introduce to you the map of Jammu and Kashmir. You can make out Srinagar in the middle, with a big roundel on that. Let me draw the line of control for you. POK stands for Pakistani occupied Kashmir, and the purple line, which is approximately 740 kilometers, is the LOC. The yellow line is in the area of Siachen. We call that as actual ground position line, about 110 kilometers, and it goes right up to the border with China. Incidentally, the area to the northwest of that line has been handed over by Pakistan to China already. And this is what happened to us during the month of April and May, when they attacked. People thought that they were jihadis. The intelligence agencies also said to us that they were jihadis, but they were not. They were actually Pakistani soldiers. And so there was a lot of, for quite some time, there was this fog of war, not knowing whether they were jihadis, Kashmiri jihadis, or they were really Pakistani soldiers. It's only after some time that we realized that they were Pakistani soldiers. And the man, of course, who was responsible for it is whose photograph I have shown now. To let you know the kind of terrain on which we had to fight. These are actual photographs taken during that period of Siachen. You know, the arrow I indicated earlier, it was between the yellow line and the purple line. That's the area. Towards the north is Siachen, and this is Siachen Glacier that you see. These are the kind of crevices that you find in that area even today, anytime. And you cannot work by yourself. Nobody can venture out in small parties. You have to go in slightly larger parties, and you have to be prepared for all kinds of, again, uncertainties, avalanches. You have to be prepared for certain crevices that come across, so you have to be prepared for that. And you see the kind of ladders that we use to cross any of these crevices that they appear. Some of the helipads are like this. You see, this has been artificially created, the helipad, just for a helicopter to land. And the helicopter there works with about almost 1/3 of its normal payload. It cannot carry its total weight because of the high altitude. The high altitude doesn't permit people, the helicopter, to carry its full load. And these are the kind of helipad that we have in that area. These are actual photographs taken of Kargil sector, and you see the sharp mountain peaks as well as the contours of the land. This is a famous Tiger Hill, about which I will speak to you later also. This is a photograph which we have taken from the helicopter, and that is how the lay of the land appears from a helicopter. And you see the heights that have been given in meters. They are in feet. They would be anything between 14,000 to 18,000 feet, all snow covered on 14th of May when this particular photograph was taken. And these peaks all became very famous because we had to recapture or we had to dislodge the enemy from these peaks. Now, just to indicate to you how the border of the LOC looks, which is not there on the ground. The line is not there on the ground, but this is how the line has been drawn on this photograph. So that was given to us. You know, we are a proper democracy. The political authority, the Cabinet Committee on Security, that lays down what is to be done by the armed forces. So this is what they had indicated, that, and to the world also, that India is a victim of intrusion, but it will exercise restraint. Now that was necessary because in 1998, just a year earlier, we had carried out nuclear weapon tests, both first India and then Pakistan. And the whole world somehow was thinking that we are a rogue state. If you recall, some of you will recall, that there were sanctions placed on us, economic sanctions. We could not speak about defense issues to any of the countries. We were not getting any help. Or even purchase of weapons was also not permitted by USA, UK, and so many other countries. So that was the condition. So that's why it had to be, the world had to be told by the our External Affairs Ministry that we will exercise restraint. India will take all measures, including military, to ensure that intruded area is vacated. And lastly, this was a major handicap, or we can say tying our hands behind our back as far as the military is concerned. The orders were that you will not cross the line of control or border when you are carrying out the operation. It was a major handicap that was given to us. Now, just to indicate to you what are the strength from the enemy side and our weaknesses, and what were our strength and their weaknesses, very briefly, yes, the enemy had achieved surprise and now had the initiative because they were literally dominating the road going from Srinagar to Kargil. We did not have any intelligence warnings. People thought, our intelligence agencies in fact thought that there will be no war. that is the kind of indication that were there. And even our ground situation when people started entering, because initially those people, Pakistani people, they came in black salwar kameez, indicating that they were all jihadis. So people thought that they were jihadis. People kept on talking about they are jihadis. Many of them are our own Kashmiri people. And you know, we have different rules of engagement against jihadis and different, particularly our own people, and different rules of engagement as far as Pakistan Army is concerned. For any enemy army, we can use any weapons. But when they are our own people, whether they are jihadis or they are not, you have to use minimum strength, absolute minimum strength. And that's what is an equipment. Obviously, they were not happy. And I'm now telling you a story that some of them went and spoke to the Prime Minister. What in Punjabi say, chugli kar diya usko. So after 3-4 days, I was walking with the Prime Minister in the corridor and he looked at me. He's a very nice, soft person. He said, General Sahab, you said that? I said, yes. He says, well, you know, you think you should have said that? So I looked at him. I told him, I said, sir, I'm a soldier. I'm not a politician or a diplomat. I said, that is the state, and I have been complaining about this for a long time. And if I had said anything different to appease you or to appease anybody else, my own soldiers would not have liked. They would have thought that here is our chief who is indulging in double speak. Kehta kuch hai aur udhar kuch aur karta hai. So I said, in that case, they would not obey my orders. I cannot afford to tell any lies at all. So please take it from me that this is the truth, and that's what I had said. You know, I mean, if your soldiers don't believe in you as a leader in combat, they will not follow your orders. So I had to tell him that, sir, I'm not a politician or a diplomat. Yes, we were told, don't cross the line of control and or the international border. But again, in one of my interviews, I had also said that if there is a requirement, if we cannot undo what has been done, then I will go back to the Cabinet Committee on Security and ask permission that please let us cross the border. And when I mentioned this once, see what happened was, Prime Minister spoke 2-3 times that I have given orders to the army not to cross the line of control or the border. When he did that second time, because in Chennai was there, he came back and I met him. I said, sir, please don't speak about that again. So he looked at me and he says, Kyo? I said, you have given orders, we are following those orders. But suppose we cannot undo what has happened there. Then I will come back to you and I'll ask you that please let us cross the border. What will you have? What answer will you have? Will you be able to say that don't do it? You cannot say that. So let that remain where it is. If there is a requirement, I'll come back to you. But please don't make it public. That day, in the evening, the NSA, that time late Mr. Brijesh Mishra, he went to the TV station. He says, on the TV network, he says, not to cross the line of control or international border that holds good today. We don't know about tomorrow. The enemy weakness and our own strength, Pakistan Army had not taken their Prime Minister or their Naval and Air Force chiefs into confidence, which came out well and proper when we monitored Pakistan chief's conversation with his Chief of General Staff from Beijing. You know, when he was speaking on telephone from Beijing to Rawalpindi, we were able to monitor what he said. This was about 29th of May, I think, 28th of May. So we knew that Pakistan Prime Minister himself did not know fully. He knew that yes, something will happen, but he didn't know what exactly. No war preparation on the Western Front. That also came to light after that. Their own logistic line in Kargil is not very good. It's a very long line and it's a very difficult logistic line. So we knew that they cannot sustain themselves for long in that area. And the other thing was that we were a superior army. We are a superior army compared to Pakistan. And when you have that kind of superiority, you should also know that yes, we can dominate any escalation that takes place. That is how I was able to warn Pakistanis that look, don't worry, we will sort you out. You know? And the other thing was Pakistan was claiming at that time, even on the telephone conversation, they were saying line of control in that area is very vague, which was not true, because after 71 war, in 72, the Indian military leaders and the Pakistani military leaders, they had drawn that line of control on a map and signed on both sides. This is the taken from the map. So you see that line which goes straight, fetching the peaks on the map, and on the northern side, on the upper side, you see Lieutenant General from Pakistan Army has signed it. So what I did, I told our DGMO, I said, "ये fax कर दो उसके Pakistan Army को, उनको बता दो कि don't tell lies." This is what we did. After a few days, we sent photostat, we sent this to them on the fax. Then they stopped talking about it. Well, the goal was quite clear, and I had to explain it to everybody, both in South Block, in Army headquarters, as well as the troops on the ground. And this is what I mentioned to them, that although the enemy has started the fight, but we will fire the last shot, and the war will end only on our terms. This is what we were able to do. This is a photograph taken in Drass, and on the extreme right you find the GOC of 8 Mountain Dew, in whose sector we were. We worked out a joint military strategy, military posture to prevent Pakistan from strengthening its military forces opposite Kargil, threatened and maintained pressure on Pakistan throughout land, air and sea border. Now here was a major thing that we all decided Army, Navy, Air Force have to work together. We have to fight together. It is not an army battle or a Navy battle or an Air Force. We have to work together. And we must create a strategic imbalance for Pakistan so that they cannot stand that challenge. If required, be prepared to launch forces across the border or LOC. And I have given orders that in 6 days' time, after I get permission from the cabinet, we should be able to cross the border. Retain balance on borders with China and Bangladesh. Obviously, we have to worry about that front also. And Pakistani claims about Kashmiri jihadis and vague LOC to be demolished through media and diplomacy. Because by this time we were now clear that this is Pakistan Army which has entered our territory. What is the military strategy? On the map I can show you, the red arrow is from them. Our immediate response was the blue arrow, but now this is the only task that I did. I warned them that look, we will come anywhere. And this is the strategy that Army, Navy and Air Force we worked on. We put all our forces on the Western Front, all means except those which are deployed on Bangladesh or China border. And the Navy and the Air Force, you will even see the ship. We started tailing their ships all the way from the Gulf going to Karachi. The tanker, oil tankers particularly, we were tailing. We were behind them. At one stage, one of their Air Force plane flew over our naval ship. So he was warned, don't come again, otherwise you will be shot down. They never came again on our ship. So this is basically the strategy that we worked out. Rest of the work was of course done by people on the ground, but it ignored a lot of things like sending additional troops and combat support to Kargil sector, formation deployed on the border, strike formations to be able to cross the border in 6 days' time. They had to be moved forward, their logistic bases had to be located. We moved a brigade from Andaman Nicobar towards Karachi People thought that we might land in Karachi, but that was a deception plan. Ultimately, they didn't go to Karachi, but they settled in Karachi all right. You see the kind of ammunition that was moved to western border and to Kargil. Part of Eastern Naval Fleet moved in to Arabian Sea. A bomb from the top. You know, even if it misses the target, naval fleet on the western coast as well as in the Bay of Bengal. So, large amount of our fleet from the Bay of Bengal was moved past Sri Lanka to the western border, to the Arabian Sea, so that we could dominate the sea. That was the work done by the Navy. I have prepared all its bases and aircraft for war, and you see the number of sorties which were flown by them, helicopters, strike missions, all kinds of sorties. Now, hereafter, I'm going to talk to you about the heroes. I want people to take note of them really. What is happening? You see the in J&K these days. We are not using, like Pakistan, they use Air Force, they use artillery, they use everything against their own militants. But we don't use that, and that is the kind of rules of engagement that we have. Enemy occupying heights in very difficult terrain, and it was quite obvious that we could not recapture those by attacking during daytime. They would not permit us to come anywhere near that. That he had, how he fought. And he never said, I did, he said, my people, my district. Unfortunately, we lost him. Not after this battle, of course, I met him and I complimented him. But next time when he went again at another feature, we lost Captain Batra, Major Vikram Batra. Here is a letter. I don't think you can read it properly, but I will tell you what kind of spirit that we have. That is the Indian soldier. We have to maintain that spirit. That is the strength of our Indian Army. There's another letter. Again, you would have heard of this boy, Captain Vijayan Thapar, who's fought that period of me going around. I didn't have to fight. People fighting were all young officers and the soldiers. But I had to go there to show my face. Yeah, I also needed motivation because in South Block in Delhi, I always saw long faces, people looking down, kya hoga, hum kar payenge, nahi kar payenge, you know, all kinds of things and all. And whenever I used to get fed up, I used to go over to the front and talk to our own people. Nobody ever said that we will not be able to do it. There were no doubts there. There, people were quite clear, it will be done. So, somewhere I must have mentioned this. Every time I needed to boost my own morale, I would go to the front and get reassured, seeing the commitment and motivation of our youngsters. Well, by end of July, not end of July, around about 10th or 11th of July, things were quite clear. And then Pakistan Prime Minister was running around. First he went to China, and then when he didn't succeed, he didn't get much from China, much support from China, then he ran to USA. And on 4th of July, which is supposed to be US Independence Day, he asked for a meeting, emergency meeting with then President of USA. And he said he wanted to pull back people from the remaining area if India could be persuaded to accept ceasefire. And most of these places, particularly in Batalik and Dras, we had in any case thrown them back. There were small areas in Mashko which were still occupied by Pakistani army. Then at Pakistan's request, which we accepted later on, the DGMO of India and Pakistan met at Wagah border on 11th of July. And by this time, Prime Minister was now saying, look, let's not, now they are wanting to withdraw, let's let them go and let's not prolong the war, because for many reasons, international pressure, as well as we were fighting under an interim government. There was no, that time It was not the election was to be held after a month or so. So we gave them a withdrawal plan finally to Pakistan, which they said yes, they will follow. But they didn't quite follow that, and by 14th July they had vacated everywhere, those small areas, except 2-3 places which they still continue to occupy. So Prime Minister asked me, he said, why are you not now finishing the war? I said, I can't, because they're still holding 2-3 small places on our side of the line of control. And I will not say that the war is over till your orders are throw them out. Throw them out means throw them out. So he said, what do you want to do? I said, we want to attack them again. So we did. We attacked them. We made sure that those places were vacated. They lost a number of people, but we were able to then say that, okay, now, as far as we are concerned, we have done what the government wanted us to do. Casualties, these are our casualties. Pakistani casualties were, our own assessment was that they lost 737 people, including 45 officers, 68 special group people, and 13 SI. But in their speeches, I have always heard Nawaz Sharif as well as late Benazir Bhutto, they have talked in terms of in thousands. Incidentally, Pakistan till today has not given any official figures. So this 737 is our assessment at that time. But now people keep on talking in terms of thousands of people. Now some more and more stories are coming from Pakistan. And the worst was that these people did not accept all the bodies that were with us, because most of their people had died on our side. And we had to bury their bodies. So it's not easy to get the targets, but they were forced from exactly. This is what the fact that we were able to show that. I think it's fighting with the height of confidence. When you do not take away your own soldiers. Every soldier who died, every soldier was, the dead body was picked up and sent to the village, kith and kin, whether they were in Manipur, Nagaland, anywhere in our country. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, wherever. We made sure that every dead body was sent. There was some prisoners of war with us, which again we returned to them. This is a photograph of some of the bodies which at one place they accepted, so we returned those. People in uniform are there, Pakistani soldiers. Well, this is what Benazir Bhutto once said. Kargil was the biggest blunder committed in the history of Pakistan. The whole operation has cost Pakistan heavily. It has given the people of Pakistan a sense of humiliation and disgrace because they were forced to withdraw in the face of international isolation. This is a photograph taken there in Dras. The air chief and I were together in 8 Mountain Day sector. Behind you see the Kargil. Behind you see the Tiger Hill, far back in the background. Well, Operation Vijay, we were successful. Strategic operational planning, courage, determination, camaraderie, and junior leadership and morale. These were the real reasons how we were. The spirit was very strong. I did not have any doubt after we captured the first place that we will not be able to do it. And my soldiers made sure that they did it. They gave me the strength. These are photographs, just a few photographs taken on the 10th anniversary of Kargil Vijay Divas, when I went there and I laid the wreath of the, now a beautiful memorial has come up in Dras. And I request anybody who goes to Kargil sector, do go to Dras and visit this. It's a really memorable memorial that we have, that people have constructed. And from there I drove down to Kargil. Kargil is a thriving town today. It's a really, you have to see the kind of people and the kind of activity which is there, enthusiasm which is there. As soon as I came to know about it, that the ex-army chief has come and all, and everybody ran from their shops and came to shake hands with me. They left their shops wherever there. That is the kind of enthusiasm. But what it shows is that today Kargil is a really thriving. Thank you very much, Mr. Target. I'll answer. The first question is because, the difference of our rules of engagement when we fight the enemy and when we fight our own jihadis is because when you are not sure whether they are your own people, whether we have fought in Nagaland or against the Naga hostiles or in Mizoram long ago or anywhere else or in Punjab also. When you do not know and you think that they are your own people, you have different rules of engagement. Because if they are your own citizens, tomorrow you can be blamed. Incidentally, they don't wear uniform. Everybody wears the same kind of clothes. And that is what is happening today also. We are following the rules of engagement in Kashmir. We are not using heavy weapons. But that is because we want to be on the right side of following human rights. People talk a lot of nonsense about violation of human rights. Let me assure you that no country in the world follows human rights as much as India does. And no country, I have seen many countries, I have seen whether Pakistan is of course one of the worst lot, but even the Americans and the British and the Russians, I have seen all of them. None of them follows human rights the way we do it. And yet we have some of our activists who keep on blaming him, keep talking about these. And this is what is happening today in Jammu and Kashmir. Your second question was, Navy has got Saurabh ground-to-air missile, surface-to-air missile. With his patrol, I think there were about 9 or 10 people. Unfortunately, he got lost for some time, and then his patrol was fully captured. All of them were captured by the Pakistanis. And they were taken on the other side. Now, we do not know exactly under what circumstances, but what we know is that there was a post which had been vacated by his unit, and they were now trying to go back to that post, which was under very heavy snow. And that's where, by the time they reached there, that particular post had been occupied by the Pakistanis. And they were all taken as prisoners of war. Subsequently, after so many days, when we were still asking them what happened about that, so they returned the bodies of Saurabh Kalia and his patrol, all of them. And some of the bodies were badly mutilated. Again, this is a total violation of human rights. And it's not that we do not talk about it. We lodged complaints. I had spoken personally to the Minister of External Affairs, Shri Jaswant Singh, at that time. But for whatever reason, the government did not follow it up in the International Court of Justice, because then it would have been again India-Pakistan over Kashmir, probably things of that nature. It's not that people don't talk about it. In fact, I have written quite a lot about Saurabh Kalia and his patrol in my book also. And I have been meeting his parents. Just last year we went to, both of us, we went to Palampur and we visited his house. We met his parents and his brother. So it's not that we don't speak about Saurabh Kalia. And the third question was?
Prisoners in Pakistani jails of 1965 and 72.
Yes.
Nobody talks about them.
No, it's not that.
They are there. There are so many instances where people have seen them.
There is an association in Rajkot in Gujarat, and there is a very famous lawyer there who has been taking up this case for decades now. And I know it because I have been in touch with him sometime.
Sir,
the problem is,
sir, we returned 94,000 of their prisoners of war during that period of time. What did we get in return?
Yeah, don't ask that question to me, ask the government.
Yeah. Why?
I'm not the government.
Yes, sir, I know that. It is a political decision. But
Yes.
why doesn't the army stand its ground and make its presence felt during that point of time?
What should the army do? Resign?
Not resign.
Then,
I mean, be forceful for our, Jawans who are there.
I don't think it is that people are not forceful, but politics is politics, and the army can only point out certain things, say that this ought to be done. We give the advice, but we don't give the orders. You must differentiate between the advice that we can give and then the orders which are given by the. And we can't do it any other way, because then, your whole democracy, your constitution, everything will go by the board. You have to follow your constitution and the duties that are laid down in the constitution for everybody.
Good evening, sir.
I think second question, I'm now speaking, I'm not part of the government, but as far as I am concerned, I would put them behind bars and send them to different corners of our country as far as separatists are concerned. I have no hesitation in saying that in public, because I do believe that ideologues, they have to be targeted first. They are the ones who are creating all the problems. Somehow, for some reason, we are not chasing that ideologue. So I'm quite convinced about that part. The first part of the question, yeah, I think we all have to understand that our boys there, whether they are policemen or they are army men, they are doing an extraordinary job. They are fighting under exceptional circumstances. We want to follow our rules of engagement. We want to follow all the human rights. And yet, when you have people throwing weapons, throwing stones at you, are hitting you, are pushing you and all that, they are all human beings. Our men are not robots. They are human beings. When they get challenged, so he reacts in a particular manner. You have your own law which says that in self-defense you can kill somebody else. But when a soldier, he puts somebody on the jeep and tries to take him like that, to save others' lives, other soldiers' lives, then you start objecting human rights. You have to understand the exceptional circumstances in which our boys are fighting there. So maybe if I was a senior officer there, I would charge him for violating human rights. But I will also take into account the circumstances under which he is fighting. And maybe I will condone him then. So you have to understand that, it's our job to do justice. And to do justice, you must know what are the circumstances under which we are fighting. I would like to ask any of these leaders that we have in Kashmir today to make somebody stand in a chowk for 20 minutes without the usual escort that we provide them. They'll be killed. But you don't want to give that kind of you do not want to condone that the army chap has put somebody on the jeep. I will probably warn him, I'll call him, I'll warn him, don't do this again. You are violating human rights. But I will also try to understand the circumstances in which he is. Most of these journalists and these writers, I'm sorry to say, they don't understand that. And sitting here in Bangalore, you can talk about all these violations, etc. You have to go to Kashmir to see that. I hope I have made myself clear.
Good evening, sir. It's great to have a legend like you in the city.
As Kashmir is concerned, it's in a mess at the moment, no doubt about it. And I'm calling it a mess. Please, in Kashmir, you require 3 agencies to work together in an optimal manner, in a synergetic manner. The forces to sort out people who create violence. I'm talking about jihadis and the intruders and infiltrators and all that, both along the line of control as well as inside, because there are some even today. So you require the military, paramilitary, as well as the army for that. Second is good governance. And the third is politics. Now you have to understand, we have had elections, we have elected leaders. But I'm sorry to say that they are not in touch with people. Politicians' first job is to remain in touch with people. When you isolate yourself and you are not in touch with people, how will you sort it out? So the first thing that is required is, you see what has happened, why situation has gone bad, is not because we did not have a good situation there. Militarily, that we had a very good situation just a few years ago. That is how you were able to hold elections and more than 65–70% people were able to vote. But thereafter, what have we done? For whatever political reasons, and I'm not getting into details of what has happened. The fact is that we lost touch with the situation in Kashmir. And we have permitted these so-called ideologues, separatists, whatever you would like to call them, to have a free they are getting money, they are getting stones. I mean, somebody is paying them. And there is no good governance because your schools have been closed down, your colleges have been closed down, nothing seems to be functioning. So you have to have effective political leadership, which is the most important thing. That effective leadership you don't see, political leadership you don't see there. Governance is in a bad state. And you have left the complete can to the armed forces or to the military force, or to the paramilitary forces. And you think that you can sort out the situation only by them? No. The job of the army or the police is to control and bring down the violence to such a level that then the politician can do his job properly. To negotiate with anybody that they have to do, it is the job of the politician. It is not my job. I have not learned that kind of politics. My job is to control the violence and bring it down to the extent. To finish the job. Ultimately, it is the politician who has to do that, which we have not been able to do for so many years now. So I think we must understand that in all such situations, militarily you cannot sort out a situation. You are handling people, your own people. Ultimately, it has to be handled by our politicians. You cannot give this. I would not like to have that kind of freedom in, that go and sort it out yourself. It cannot be done. The second part of the question was AFPA. Yeah, it's a very sensitive issue. And, personally I believe that we should not keep our armed forces at any place for a long period. It creates problem for the public as well as for the armed forces themselves. When they have done their job, get them out of that place. My job is not to handle public day in and day out. That's a policeman's job. But when, for any reason, you keep the army there day in and day out, whether the situation is good or bad, then you have bigger problem. So if you ask my own opinion, AFPA should be there when the forces are required to do some work. When the armed forces have created a good situation, and situation is now coming to near normal, then let the CRPF or the police, etc. do the job. Then you don't require AFPA. Firstly, please don't give me credit. Credit goes to all the people, ex-servicemen who are sitting here, who have been in service with me, and those who are still on the border, all that. So the credit goes to them. The second question that you have, the second part of your question about the Surgical strike. Am I right? Surgical strike. Yeah, surgical strike was needed. It was done. And it was done very well. One has to appreciate that. They did it remarkably well. Even as a soldier, I am saying that it was an excellent job that they did. Maybe we will be required to do it again. If we have to do it again, we should do it. Whenever it is required, it can be done, it should be done. But please don't play politics with that. Don't play politics with that. That's the job of the soldier. He's done his job, give him credit, and then leave it. And they were effective to the extent it is possible. It's not so easy at all.
This is my last question. Today,
told us don't cross the line of control. The Cabinet Committee on Security had very categorically told us don't cross the line of control. I had briefed them myself, okay, and in that particular meeting I had said that all three of us have to work together, Army, Navy, Air Force, and we will require other help. With the cabinet people were there, they said, no, okay. But they put that rider, please don't cross the line of control. I think the primary reason was because we were still being considered by the international community as a rogue state having carried out nuclear weapon tests. And you know, there were so many sanctions on us. And so they put that rider on that. So it was that rider. I mean, I could have gone back after some time to say that, look, we need to cross the border, etc. But that need did not arise really. Maybe we would have gone across if there was a need. But after some time we felt that they themselves were not wanting to run away. So that is it. But then that's a political question, it's not an army.
So most of the focus of the interaction has been on Kashmir and its aftermath and the developments. But my question is to you is pertaining.
It was too late, but I can give you the reason why it was not used earlier, which it could have been used maybe. It was not used earlier because the situation was absolutely foggy, as I said. For many days, people did not know that we were fighting jihadis or we were fighting Pakistan Army. And you don't want to use your air force against your own people, jihadis, whether they are Kashmiri jihadis or not. So that was the other thing is that there is as soon as you start using air force, there will be escalation straight away. You know, then it goes into international community. You have to handle that situation, and maybe you know the government did not want that at that time. So it is only after our request to them that look, we need to use the air force, and they should be used. And they said, okay, even the air force was used, but not to cross the border. I remember the three chiefs, Army, Navy and Air Force, we once went to the cabinet and we said, look, let the Air Force go a few kilometers on the other side because there was a particular target which they wanted to hit. But for that they had to come from the Pakistani side. And the cabinet said no. So I won't say that there was any, the real problem was foggy situation in the war, and the cabinet did not want to escalate the whole thing. After some time they gave us permission. Maybe we have the last question. Okay. No, somebody. Let him ask.